And we're going to start with just easy sitting at first. So if you want, you can put a block underneath your hips, underneath your glutes. And if you don't need that, then just sit right there on your heels. So this is basically Vajrasana. Virasana is if you're sitting between the heels, but that might be just a little bit too much for what the knees need to start things off smoothly. So you just get grounded, close your eyes, place your hands somewhere on your lap that's neither going to pull your torso forward nor push it backwards. So somewhere mid-ish on the thighs. And give yourself permission to just kind of be heavy, to really feel the force of gravity on the body. And then relax your jaw, relax your forehead. And part of relaxing the jaw could definitely mean that you're separating the bottom row of teeth from the top row of teeth. But that doesn't require the mouth to actually be open. You can still keep your lips sealed and keep the jaw relaxed. And just see if you can notice how the relaxation of your jaw begins to influence the relaxation of the rest of your, you could say, oral channel or your gustatory tract. Your digestive tract, which begins really at the mouth and ends where it ends, where we all know it ends. And as you relax your eyes, as you relax the actual skin of your eyelids, all of this conspires to bring about the parasympathetic state, the relaxed state into the body. Can you tell whether or not you're sitting a little bit more heavily, more preferentially, on the right heel and glute or on the left heel and glute? If you detect any kind of preference or leniency towards one, then see if you can reconfigure so that your weight is more symmetrically distributed. And the interesting thing about that very simple but subtle observation is that you were able to observe it as soon as you were asked to. And so when somebody says, just pay attention to your body, let it relax, you don't necessarily just gravitate towards that analysis of weight distribution. But when it's asked for, you do something with your mind that takes it there. You direct your focus. And so the more insightful premise is that you had the capacity to pay attention to your sit bones, to the quality of your legs as a whole, way before I said anything. And yet your attention just wasn't really directed there. And what this speaks to is the fact that the body's always communicating something to us. The body always has some story to tell. It's just that we're not always listening to it. In this practice, we learn how to actually be more mindful. The actual definition of mindfulness is to be aware of as much as you can be aware of without having to be prompted by somebody else. So keep your jaw relaxed. Slowly start to open your eyes. And then come forward on all fours and curl your toes under, and we'll have a little short toe sit. We're going to focus a little bit more on the legs today, so a good way to start our leg day practice is, of course, with the feet, because the base of the legs is the feet. So when you get your toes curled under, as such, You can always scale back the intensity that you're noticing in your feet or in your toes by either propping up a block between the heels and your bum, or you can put a block underneath your knees. But to offset some of the tension, if it's a little bit too excessive that you just can't seem to find that same sense of peace, separate your thighs, or you can also lean your body forward. And for about 2 more breaths, with each exhale that you take, persevere a little bit longer, a little bit more insistently on how long your exhale lasts, so you can make it last a little bit longer, so you're really extracting all of that old breath right from out of you. Great. And then come forward again to your hands. Point your toes back. And then again, sit back on the heels in the same exact way. Okay. And then restoring the feet back to the first position. Let's add a little twist to this. So we'll turn to the left first. And we've all done this before. So if your left hand can't reach behind you, you can always put a block between the back hand and the floor, or you could just simply recline backwards. And, you know, Michelle's got nice, long, beautiful arms. If she didn't, if she had, what do we hear? T-Rex arms, then she would recline backwards a little bit more. Just as long as you understand that reclining shouldn't mean slumping or bending sideways. So each inhale that you take, project your left arm into the floor so it helps to actually uplift the ribs. And when your ribs uplift, your spine elongates. When your spine elongates, your spine decompresses. So length and space in our joints implies goodness, function. On the next inhale, come back to center, turn to your right. And then same thing with the right hand, either a block underneath the hand or you can recline. Where you hold your right thigh with your left hand will also give you more or less leverage. So it's best not to hold too far around the knee, and it's best not to hold too close at the hip. And ideally, you have your wrist, in this case the left wrist, in line with the left elbow so that as you're pulling, you have the least amount of effort expended to still get the best result. But be that as it may, still don't pull too much or too hard in this twist. What we really want to be able to focus on, as I was talking about, is this whole element, is your back arm being able to push down and in turn start to decompress the spinal column. Because really the spine is what we're after in yoga. We want flexible hips, we want flexible shoulders, but our quality of life is vastly improved if our spine has flexibility. Even if you have stiff hips and shoulders, having a flexible, minimally flexible spine can do a lot for your well-being. Whereas if you just had flexible hips and shoulders but a stiff spine, that's not a life that's very enjoyable. On the next inhale, come back to center, come forward onto your hands and knees one more time. Curl your toes back under. We'll do this last time. In some of my other practices and classes, I actually have people do this 3 or 4 times, sometimes even 5 times. Notice now as you land back on your feet and land back on your toes, is the tension as severe as it was in the first set? And let's remember that that intensity, the stretching intensity that we feel in a lot of yoga poses shouldn't exceed beyond about a level 7. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is intolerable pain and 1 is absence of any sensation, you want to make sure that you stay right at that, what we call that edge. That's the edge. It's that 7 level of intensity past which you're courting some danger and possible injury. And prior to that intensity level, you're cutting your body short of what it can actually do. After your last exhale, come forward to your hands and then just start to move your way back into downward dog. And so whatever initial movements you'd like to go through, just to kind of cast off the initial layer of dust and crust, pedaling your heels, moving your hips, whatever you like. Just make sure that your neck is relaxed so that the weight of your head can be helpful in decompressing the neck. And at every turn, What we also learn in yoga is how to use gravity to our advantage. Since we can't really escape gravity, we want to be able to create a variety of the ways that it interacts with the body, that it places that gravitational force on the body. And so that's why being upside down is so restorative by nature, because now you're using the weight of the head to create space in your neck joints, whereas before the weight of your head was used to compress the neck joints. Spread your fingers a little bit more, and then spread your toes. If you look at the outer edges of your feet, like the outer ankles, make sure that they are no more narrow than the width of your hips. And if you try to spread your toes a little bit more, you will notice that it increases the sensation in your feet. And when you have an increase in sensation, you have an increase in the ability to interact with it better and more subtly. On your next inhale, come forward to high plank. And create a nice dome shape right here in your upper back. So what it feels like, what it should feel like, is you're projecting your arms down as if you wanted to lift your chest further and further away from the floor. So it's as if you're replicating crow pose just in your upper back here. Keep your legs nice and strong. And on the next exhale, lower all the way to the mat. When you get there, make sure your hands are in line with the shoulders, not necessarily underneath. Keep your glutes engaged. Press your toenails into the mat. In this first little cobra, don't feel like you have to push up too far. Some of you might have more flexibility, some less. So just make sure as high as you lift, go to about 50% of what you know your full capability is. So if you have the ability to actually go into a vertically set spine in your cobra pose, then go to about 45 degrees. Just make sure no matter how high or not you come up, your glutes are always working. We're going to start to stimulate the glutes because the glutes are our key hip extensors, which is key to low back health. One more inhale. And as you exhale, place your hands back down. Sorry, put your head back down. And then curl your toes under and either do one of two things. It's up to you. If you still need a little warm up, you're going to press back to child's pose and then dog pose. Or from here, you can go right into your upward dog. And then from there, proceed to downward dog. Keep your fingers well spread. As soon as you get back to dog pose, relax the neck. Having now taken care of the feet, ignite the legs. Ignite the anterior compartment of your legs. Mainly by that, I mean the quadriceps. And if you're wearing shorts and you can actually see your knees, you'll see that your kneecaps lift when you engage the legs in that way. So keep the quadriceps nice and toned. Take one more breath out. On the next inhale, lift your heels, bend the knees, and then walk or step your feet forward to the hands. And once you get your hands or your feet close to the hands, keeping the feet together for now, lift your kneecaps and inhale, lengthen the trunk so your chest and your head extends away from the pelvis. And exhale, as you fold, try to sustain that length that you just acquired. Let's do that a couple more times. Inhale, lengthen. Keep the toes a lift and a flared. Exhale, fold back in. See if you can still keep your toes nice and elevated. One more time like this, maybe even closing the eyes. Inhale, lengthen, really saturate your lungs. And exhale, empty the lungs to completion. And if you have your eyes closed, you can even keep your eyes closed on the ascent all the way up to standing. So on the next inhale, use your legs to actually project the body away from the floor. The way that you push your feet into the ground helps to really influence the way that your torso lifts back up. And on the exhale, arms come back down at the sides. Inhale, lift your arms up, lift your toes up. Exhale, fold forward. Don't rush in your breathing. Inhale, lengthen. Half lift. Exhale, plant your palms, step back. So this might be your first chaturanga. Be very, very critical about how you do this. So when you exhale, lower down to your low plank. Make sure you keep your hands in line with the shoulders. Inhale, slide forward to upward dog. And use your belly button retraction technique to pull back to downward dog on the exhale. Good. Just 5 breaths in dog pose. Again, reset, reinvigorate your legs by resetting and reinvigorating your toes. Keep your neck soft and easy. And keep the rest of your face, so just your whole facial expression, your composure, if you will, just starts to really come more to neutral, so that it's neither excited nor sad and depressed. And if you keep your face more neutral, then you can actually pick up the information and sensations from the body with more of that same neutrality and less bias, which is always subject to misinterpretations. On the next inhale, lift your heels up. Exhale, bend your knees, walk, step, or hop forward. And then inhale, lift your toes, engage your quadriceps. Now feel and connect to your quadriceps as you fold. And now you can start to turn the quadriceps off as you come up. You want to use more your glutes and your hamstrings, so feel free to clench them the whole way upwards. And on the exhale, arms come down. Everything relaxes for a moment before the next inhale as the arms go back up. Exhale, fold back forward. Keep your heels heavy, toes light. Inhale, lengthen. Keep the legs toned. Quadriceps are number 1 right now. Exhale, plant your palms, step back. And lower to your low plank, still stay number 1 in your quads. As you go to this back bend, now engage more your glutes. And as you come back to downward dog, switch back to your quads playing the dominant role. Okay, so we know how important it is to be assertive in the legs. The benefit of using our legs properly, to actually using it dynamically, placing some challenge on them, is that it demands more energy, because you feel that. And so when you put your body where there's more output demand, where there's a higher energy demand, your body has to actually ramp up its functions, most important of which is your cellular function, your cellular respiration. It's the way that your cells help create energy, how they metabolize certain nutrients and create energy out of it. On the next inhale, lift your heels up. Exhale, bend your knees, walk, step, or hop forward. Inhale, lengthen, lift your toes. Exhale, fold back. And then on the next inhale, squeeze your feet into the ground as you come all the way up. Think of it as simply pressing the mat away from you instead of just lifting the torso. And exhale, arms come down. Let's do one more. Big inhale, big happy toe lift. And as you exhale, keep your toes lifted, because that sets the precedent that makes it easier to engage the quads. Inhale, lengthen. Exhale, plant your palms. Step back. Take your time getting through your low plank especially. And when we meet back in downward dog, we'll play around with a couple of little digressions from there. So let's get into our first digression. Step your right foot forward between the hands and bring your left knee to the mat. Good. Lift your torso upright. Okay. And then lift your arms overhead. Interlace your fingers. Squeeze the tips of the fingers firmly against the backs of the hands. And then see if you can lunge further forward into the hips, into the legs, where the left thigh comes closer to the ground, but reach your upper body back. So try to keep the front of the torso as far away from the front leg as before you started lunging deeper. Good. We're going to take one more breath in there. And as you exhale, bring your hands down. Still keep the left knee on the mat. Keep your left hand on the mat and lift your right arm up. So we'll start with this easy twist, and the reason that this twist you can call easy is not because necessarily of how not difficult it is, but it's how easy it distributes the pressure along your spine, how well it distributes the pressure along your spine. Being that it's not a directly upright pose, it liberates the lower back from its constant mode of pressure to where you can twist in a more therapeutic setting. On the next inhale, bring your right hand down, step your right leg back, and then take a vinyasa from there. So follow your exhale all the way through. And when you come back to downward dog again, just step your left foot forward. I almost said light foot forward. Right knee down to the mat. Lift your torso upright. And before we lift the arms overhead, think of it this way. What helps keep the body upright is muscles along the back of the body. So in a lunge, it's going to be specifically here on the left side, the right glute. The right glute is the one that you need to act with more. And if you have that right glute in check, lift your arms up and then start to lunge your hips and your pelvis a little bit deeper. So it's like your pelvis is coming closer to the front heel and further from the right knee. Now as you lunge forward, remember, keep your torso away from the front leg. And project your arms up so that, it elevates your shoulder blades more. You're getting your shoulders to your ears. One more big inhale. Good. Exhale, bring your hands down. And maybe on that same exhale, lift your left arm up, right hand down. Good. Keep your front toes lifted. And I find that even if you don't need your feet for balancing, the seemingly simple act of lifting your toes immerses our mind right into the feet. And because our mind has to be immersed in the feet, because if it wasn't, the toes would drop and you'd forget about it. If you're more immersed in your feet, by association, you're going to be more immersed in your legs. So it's kind of like if you get some excellence in your feet, you're going to be that much closer to gaining more excellence of function in your legs. Next inhale, bring the left arm down. Step your left leg back and then proceed down to your low plank, nice and easy. And then once you go up to upward dog, we come back to downward dog. Relax the neck, drop the head. 5 breaths. And challenge yourself even in downward dog. A lot of people treat downward dogs as kind of like a means to an end. Right? Not an end necessarily in themselves. And you want to be able to create excellence of function in your legs, irrelevant of what pose you're in, because if you excel with them in one posture, that's absolutely going to carry over to most other postures. And that's why precision is so important, because when you get it right in one posture, it increases your chances of success in every single other one. On the next inhale, lift the heels up, please. Exhale, bend the knees. Walk, step, or hop your feet forward. Feet together. Inhale, lengthen the torso. Exhale, fold. Now let's stay in the fold. Separate your feet about hips width. If you're experiencing any exorbitant, restriction in your hamstrings or lower back pain doing a forward bend, you can take a wider stance with your feet. But for these ones, let's grab the back of the lower legs, like right around the back of the ankles, so that your fingers, your 4 main fingers, are curling in to the inside of the leg, and your thumbs are on the outside, pointing down towards the floor. And so what I want you to think about doing isn't just using your arms to try to squish your torso to your legs, but try to use your arms as if you were pulling your heels off the mat, so that there's this upward direction to the way that you're pulling. And since you're pulling upward on the heels, right, this is just basic physics, something has to go down. So you're creating, by doing that, a downward lengthening of the spine where the head is progressively getting closer to the floor, which unburdens your lower back from a lot of pressure that all lower backs have. Good. Let's take one last breath out. Keep your quadriceps engaged. And then release your hands. On the inhale, lengthen your torso forward for a half lift. And exhale, step back. Go through a vinyasa. Make sure that your shoulders stay in line with the hands. Good. Perfect. Once you're back to downward dog, step your right foot forward between the hands. And then walk both hands over to the left. So we're going to set up for Prasarita Padottanasana, where both sets of toes are facing the same direction that the top of your head is pointing to. If you look down, you want to make sure that your hands are about shoulder width, okay, and directly below the shoulders, at least just to start. Now think about it this way. Press away from the floor and try to look forward. Try to extend your chest forward as if you're trying to push off the ground and get your chest up to the ceiling. So you create a little bit of a concave in your spine, a little bit of a back bend. Now, if you stick your sit bones out a little bit more, that's going to require your quadricep activity. Keep the sitting bones aiming high, and then start to maybe walk your hands in between the legs, back behind you. And as you do this, little by little, your head's going to come closer and closer to the ground. Now, the head doesn't have to touch the ground. For those of you whose head is touching the ground and you're just used to this is just a part of your habit in the pose, this is something that doesn't cause too much strain, too much challenge, then the way that you increase a little bit more challenge into this posture is you bring your feet a little bit closer together. Because when you do that, your pelvis lifts higher off the ground and you have to do that much more work to get the top of the head back to the mat. And if you can't get the head to the mat, you can take a wider stance, which conversely brings your pelvis closer to the floor. Being upside down in this posture for just the last 3 breaths, see if you can tilt a little bit more body weight forward so it's not so just heavy on the heels. And then as you do this, create more pressure on the inner edges of your feet. So it's not like you're hugging your feet into center. Think about more you're isometrically pushing your feet away from center. On the next inhale, walk your hands forward, come back to the straight elbow position, and then return by walking your hands back to the right. We're going to stay in a high lunge now with the right foot forward. Keep your left leg straight. And then get to upright position, upright with the trunk. It's really the same exact thing, the same principles and techniques as you had in the low lunge before. Now the trick here is how do you bend the front knee enough to get the front thigh parallel to the ground without collapsing your chest onto the front thigh, which is going to be the tendency. So the only answer, the only antidote to that is more recruitment, yes, of your left glute. And it's going to be your left glute that's the base of the spine that keeps it in this upright position. Lift your arms up. Good. Last 2 breaths. If you want more challenge, you can try to lift the front toes. And next exhale, bring your hands to the mat. Keep your left hand down, lift your right arm back up. So we're going back into this twist. Now the back knee is elevated. And if you analyze this compared to the previous low lunge, and maybe you could just see as an example, so Michelle's going to bring her knee down. So look at Michelle's spine and torso in this twist when she has the knee down, and then look at it now, she lifts the knee up. And so hopefully what you saw is that her spine is more horizontal when the back knee is lifted, which takes an even greater load off of the lower back and permits even better rotation. Because when you load up your joints, they're dangerous to move with a lot of pressure behind them. Next inhale, bring your right hand down, step your right leg back. Take a nice slow descent, very conscious, remember, mindful descent into your low plank. And when you return back to downward dog, you're going to step your left foot forward. So we're going to go right back to the high lunge. When you're ready, come on up, hands on the hips. Yes, perfect. Keep your right glute engaged, bend the front knee, and get your front thigh as close as you can to horizontal without having your lower belly spill forward onto the floor or over your front leg. Back leg sharp, arms up. Now, a lunge is not an easy posture. It's far from it. There's a lot of moving pieces. It's a lot of complicated parts. So first of all, give yourself credit for just being able to stay in it. But second, giving yourself credit, try not to stay just too satisfied with that. Continue encouraging your right glutes action. Continue encouraging your back knee straightening etiquette. We're going to take one more deep breath in. As you exhale, hands come down to the mat. Right hand stays, left arm lifts. And it's not like you can get a maximum amount of twist in this kind of a twist. So we have to know that not all twists are made the same, and that should be obvious. Not all poses are made the same. So at the very deepest, you're going to be able to have your chest facing off to the wall that's left of you. But when you look up, and to the degree that you look up, you can actually encourage your neck to rotate more. So what I love so much about this kind of twist isn't what it does for the main part of your spine, it's what it allows you to do and what it allows you to impress on the mechanics of your neck. On the next inhale, left hand comes down, step your left leg back, and then lower down to low plank, proceed on from there to upward dog. Make sure you get that big fill up at the top of your dog, and exhale, back to regular downward dog. Where again, you relax your neck, you drop the head, let the weight of your head encourage that downward pull and space within the neck joints. And you know why it's so important to decompress our spinal joints? Is because the discs in our spine are mostly made of water, like 80 to 90% of water. And they're called hydrophilic, so they have an affinity for water, like a sponge. So when you get decompressed like this and you lengthen and get space in those joints between those discs, between the vertebrae, the hydration that you're able to take back into the discs is just priceless, and it's absolutely necessary for the maintenance of your spinal health. Next inhale, lift your heels up. Exhale, bend the knees, walk, step, or hop forward towards the hands. Good. Inhale, lengthen the chest forward. Exhale, fold downward. And then inhale, slowly come all the way back up with your arms coming to meet at the very top of your inhale. And exhale, arms down. Good. Now you're going to keep your legs together. You're going to bend the knees into Utkatasana, but put your hands on the knees, right on the lower thighs. So as you sit this way in Utkatasana, you can sit deeper and deeper. Just make sure that your toes are lifted and most of your body weight is on the heels. The way that you're going to have your hands on your knees here is your fingers should face in towards each other. Okay, now you're going to take your left hand, place it over the right hand. So now both hands are on the right leg. And then keep your right knee bent that deep, but lift your left heel up. Yes. Keep your chest a little bit forward, so it's going to help you counterbalance and not fall. Now see if you can just stand on the right bent leg and lift the left foot off the floor like you want to kick your butt to your heel. Kick your butt to your heel, kick your heel to your butt. Now from there, if you bend your standing leg a little bit more and tilt your chest forward, you're going to use that to step your left leg back quietly and end up in a high lunge again. Just make sure your high lunge is not just high, it's also long. So front thigh horizontal, back knee straight, and the foot vertical. Okay, just to do something different and get a little bit more therapy exerted on the shoulders, bring your arms back behind you and see if you can hold your opposite elbows. And we're going to try to do that for the next couple postures. If you can't quite get your fingers to around the elbows, just get as close as you can. But pull your shoulders and elbows back so your chest emanates forward. Now you're going to straighten the front leg and then pivot your back foot to a triangle / warrior 2 position. Once you get the back heel in place, then bend the front knee and go into warrior 2. Still holding your arms behind your back, how far can you rotate your chest to the left? Like imagine you wanted to just face your chest towards your left foot. So try to turn that much, all while steering your front knee to the right. It's very good. Now we're going to inhale, straighten the front leg. And now keeping your hands behind your back still, we're going to go into triangle pose. So now you don't have the luxury of using your hands as a barometer for your triangle technique. Now you really have to rely on the sensitivity of everything but the arms. And the more you tilt, the more you have to watch out so that the right side of the torso stays in the same shape with the same amount of length as the left side. Now, you have your hands behind you, right? Find out where your left fingertips are and see if you can grab your right thigh with your left fingertips. So you wrap your arm behind you in a bind, and then you can release your right hand down. So you can either grab your shin with the bottom hand or just place it on the ground or a block if you like. If you don't have a block handy, the best thing is just put your hand on your shin and continue revolving your neck. So if you can actually have your face come to be flush with the ceiling, that's a pretty advanced depth of rotation for triangle pose. Your left fingertips that are behind you, if you can grab your thigh, see if you can go a little bit further and actually sneak your fingers just like this to the inner thigh. And what's going to help you do that is if you rotate to the left a little bit more, that gets your hand in further. But make sure your fingertips are clenching back against the thigh muscle, so you use that hand clench to keep the left shoulder retracted and peeled back better. So very nice. Keep the left hand there, bend the front knee into side angle position, Parsvakonasana. Good, so we're really going to cook the legs today. Remember, we're going to increase the energy and action demand on the body so that the body has to work more efficiently, more quickly to produce energy, and then that starts to speed up your overall cellular metabolism, which is just the collective workload of your whole system. Now from here, still keep the left hand behind your back. This is going to be the last pose, at least in this sequence. Step forward into balancing half moon. And the good thing about the hand still holding around your thigh is that it keeps your chest more confronted towards that left wall, towards where your chest was facing before. Perfect. If you lift your right leg up high, just make sure you're not rotating your toes to the ceiling. Okay, now release your left hand. Good. And see how far you can rotate your head and look up. Balancing half moon is basically triangle pose flipped over 90 degrees and standing on one leg. So let's see if you can switch that when you come back to triangle pose in a nice quiet landing. And so we'll stop there for about 2 or 3 breaths just to check in with our triangle elements. And on the next inhale, go ahead, bring your left hand down, step your right leg back, and see if that same exhale can draw you down to your low plank and upward dog, downward dog from there. Great. Let's step the left foot forward. Step the right foot forward. Stand up. Okay, so we'll take that right from the top again. Bend the knees, put both hands on your thighs, and bend the knees deep, lift your toes, stick your butt out so you can situate more landing on the heels. Both hands go over the left thigh. First, lift your right heel, just the heel, keep the toes down. Kind of see where your balance is so far, and when you're ready for it, lift the whole right foot off the ground, try to get your heel close to the bum. So first, squeeze in as much as you can, and then bend the standing leg a little bit further perhaps as you reach your right leg back and make a soft landing for high lunge. Now on the left side. Good. With your arms up, concentrate on the output of your right glute. Concentrate on it. bring your arms back behind you. So again, hold the elbows, push your arms into your spine, and use that as leverage to pull your shoulders back. Now, back legs, whole scene, right? The whole presentation of the back leg doesn't change as you straighten the front leg. And then pivot to the beginnings of your warrior two. Once you get the back heel down, bend the front knee. And right away as your front knee bends, steer the front knee leftward, which means that if you try to just turn your head and look at your left big toe, you should be able to see your big toe. If your left knee is blocking it, it needs to be turned out more. Conversely, turn your chest more and more right. Okay, now straighten the front leg. And then exhale, slowly tilt sideways and go into triangle pose with your arms behind your back. And see how far you can tilt. If you have to narrow your stance, that's fine. But try to tilt to the point where you would be normally already in regular triangle pose. Let me bring your feet together a little closer. Okay, now with your right fingers, try to grab the upper left thigh. Perfect. If you can get your fingers more to the inside of the thigh, great. Left hand comes down, either grabbing the shin or on the mat behind the leg. Press down with your left arm, which takes a lot of load off of your abdominal muscles. And we do want to load them, just not in triangle pose. Because if you release your abdominal muscles, you can use your hand to create a little bit better rotation to the right, turning your head. Keep your right shoulder back behind you, but bend your knee, front knee into Parsva Konasana. Keep the outer edge, in this case, of your back foot pressed or at least reaching for the ground. Good. Now make your preparations to step forward into balancing half moon. Perfect. Keep your right hand behind you still. Once you get everything perfect, everything in line, then carefully release the right hand and reach it up towards the ceiling. Recalling what you did in triangle pose, repeat that here. Try to keep turning your head up. Aim for having your face be flush with the ceiling eventually. And maybe without looking down, maybe without even looking back, step back to triangle pose. Awesome. Good. We're going to take one more full inhale. And as you exhale, bring your right hand down, step your left leg back. Control the action of your legs as you move through your vinyasa. Never let them slacken at any point. And when you're back to downward dog, relax your neck, drop the head. Okay, so it's a good, strong energy class today. Okay, so from here, step your right foot forward between the hands. And keep the back heel up for now, but straighten the front leg. Okay, and then just start to fold, not so much as I've talked about before, with the center of your torso over the front leg, but more of the whole right hemisphere of your torso over the right leg. Because the reason there is, if you trace up from the anatomical position, the right side of the body is on the same track as the right leg. And if you do this pose and you try to bring the center of your torso, the midline, over the front leg, that's going to create some twisting. And we want to be careful with when we twist, especially when the twist is outside of our awareness, because twisting coupled with forward folding can really exacerbate the pressure on the low back discs. Now, your back heel can stay lifted if your lower back feels a little sensitive or you just have history of something there. Otherwise, keep the back heel down. And irrelevant of what your back heel is doing, also look at where your feet are located. Make sure that the line that your right foot is on, your left foot is not on. So maybe move your left foot more to the left. so that the width, the lateral width between your feet is more representative of the space between the hips, the lateral space between the hips. Okay, from there, bring your hands more underneath your shoulders. Keep your left hand to the inside of your left foot, and then lift your right arm up. So this is kind of like step one in twisting triangle. If you can't get the whole left palm down, it's absolutely a great idea to stay on the fingertips. The one great thing about stabilizing yourself on your fingertips is that you make your fingers stronger, which means you make your grip a little stronger. Stronger grip, you get stronger and better, more healthy, stable shoulders. So that's kind of step one in our triangle. Next is place your right hand on your right hip, and then see if you can place your left hand over the right shin, just on the right shin. So this is part two of our triangle. Now it's a little bit more difficult because you don't have the balancing support of your left arm. Re-extend your right arm up. Notice how this triangle pose comes through the body, how it feels when you're only pressing off your front leg. But still try to imagine pressing off the leg in order to ascend the body. Very nice. And then if you like, step three, the last and final one, bring your right hand to the hip, bring your left hand to the outside of the foot. Make sure that your outer forearm, the outer part of your left forearm, is in contact with the outer edge of your right shin. And it's not that you're just pushing down, it's almost like you're sweeping your bottom arm to the left, which in turn lifts your chest and rotates the spine. On the next inhale, bring the right hand to the mat. Lift your back heel up, step forward into balancing hand-supported warrior three. Perfect. Keep your back toes aiming straight to the floor. And if you imagine you had somebody here to press down on the right heel, you want to be able to press right back into them. So that keeps your glutes responsible, which is huge for lower back maintenance. Now keep the left leg in that condition. Place the right hand on your right hip again. So all those phases of twisting triangle can be replicated right here in our supported warrior three. So then you can start to lift your right arm up, keeping the bottom hand to the left of your front bottom foot, to the left of your bottom foot. So that gives you more lateral width. Okay, I know this is not an easy one. Place your right hand on your right hip. Now place your left hand more in line with the foot. It's totally okay to be on the fingertips. You will notice your left leg get more fatigued, but it's fine. Fatigue is exactly what makes it better and stronger. Re-lift your right arm, re-twist. Nice. And then for the last and final step, right hand goes back on the right hip, and maybe step your bottom hand, left hand, to the right of your right foot. No matter how minimally, just a little bit to the right. Now this is really going to complicate your balance, which is going to make you pay more attention. You're going to have these last couple of breaths. If you can look down the whole time, if balance just seems a little bit too out of control. And then next inhale, bring your right hand down, step your left leg back, step the right leg back to follow, take a vinyasa. And as you come back to downward dog, step your left foot forward. We'll start with Parsvottanasana. Good, so as before, either keep your back heel lifted if your lower back needs a little bit extra care and attention around it, or bring the back heel down. Just make sure the angle of your foot doesn't exceed about a 1 or 2 o'clock position. The why. Why are we doing this pose before twisting triangle? The main reason is that if we encourage more flexibility, a big chunk of which is going to come from your left hamstring, a little bit from your right hamstring, but mostly left, is that flexibility that allows you to flex deeper in the hips, takes pressure off your low back. So if we get far with that in this pose, all twisting triangle is this pose plus a twist. So you're going to do the twisting triangle with less pressure on the low back. And again, it goes back to what I said. The worst thing you can do to your lower back is you flex forward and twist. That's one of the most dangerous movements that we just have to watch out for. It's not like it's bad, but there's more movements that we have to be more careful with. Bring your hands back underneath your shoulders. Start with our step one, right hand right below the right shoulder, left hand on the hip. And then you just start with this twisting triangle. And for this twisting triangle, the back heel can stay up the whole time. It's going to put more challenge in your balance, but it's not going to be dangerous. Good. Treat it if you can turn your head a little bit more and get your nose to point to the ceiling. Okay, now left hand goes back on the left hip. Place your right hand right on top of your left shin or right on top of your ankle. And get like a good hold of it, really grab it, and push it down. Like imagine the instruction was grab your shin and stuff it down into the floor. So notice what that stuffing etiquette technique does to the lift of your chest and rotation of your spine. With your left arm up, look up. If looking up is too challenging, you feel compromised in your balance, look down the whole time. Now left hand goes back on the left hip, and for our final form of twisting triangle, right hand goes to the outside of your left foot. So to the left of your left foot, make sure the outer part of your forearm is touching the outer part of your shin, and then sweep your right arm to the right. Like you're trying to sweep your front leg out from underneath you, and use that to get a little bit more catapulting of your chest and your spinal rotation. Perfect. Left hand goes on the left hip. Now you're going to step forward to a finger-supported warrior three. You can definitely keep both hands down initially just to kind of get your bearings, get the layout. Make sure your back toes are facing straight down. And imagine somebody's pressing down on the heel, so you're controlling your glute in lifting that leg up. Now, right hand stays where it is, left arm goes up. Or you can just keep your left hand on the hip. As long as you're directing your chest to the left and eventually up, a twist is a twist. A twist is not necessarily deeper by doing something else with your top arm here. Okay, now left hand on the left hip, line up your right hand more in line to your right foot. It doesn't have to be close to the foot, just on the same track, you know? Okay, so then you can re-lift your left arm. You have to control so many elements. The lift of the right leg, the balance of the left leg. This is a complicated posture. This is really good. Now if you want to go for the final one, left hand comes to the hip, right hand steps slightly to the outside line of your left foot. And then you can re-lift your left arm. Keep looking down if it's a little bit too shaky to balance looking up, but eventually think of directing your nose up. When you educate your neck for better rotation, the neck educates the rest of the spinal column. Next inhale, right foot comes down, both hands to the mat, stepping your left leg back. Cycle through your final vinyasa here. And as soon as you come back to downward dog, maybe just for a breath or so being in there, let's come right down to child's pose. And you can keep your hands either next to the legs, or you can keep your arms out in front of you. Make sure that your head rests. You can always pull a blanket or a block out to make sure the weight of your head rests on that. And another way, easier way maybe to get your forehead to rest on the mat is just to keep your thighs more separated instead of together in child's pose. Okay, so we'll finish here with a little bit more mobility. We've gotten a lot of flexion. We're just going to work on a little bit of hip extension, and that should make for a great entry into our Shavasana. So this is where your 1 to 2 blocks might come in hand. So you're going to sit up, and then we'll start with the left leg because we rarely do. So step your left foot forward. You're going to go into a low lunge. And if you need to pad your right knee with anything, then that might make a big difference for you. So make the rest of these characteristics of the posture as minimally invasive as possible so that you can really focus on what needs to be focused on. Hands stay on the mat. Extend your right leg back and your left foot forward so that you maximize the distance between them. Yep. And then with your hands on the ground, again, try a little bit more. See how far you can get that right knee back away from the front of the body. Now, once you got that front knee as far back as possible, you're going to use a block and start with it probably in the tall setting here. You're going to place the block, pinpoint it right underneath your sitting bone. And you'll know it's a sitting bone because it has that nice, strong, sharp edge. Once you have balance on it, then you can sit up. Now, if that level of block you can't even reach yet, that's okay. What you can do is you can create a little tower with your blocks where the bottom block would be on its lowest setting. So you can imagine if this block, the tall block, sat on top of this block, it's kind of like an upside down letter T, and you would sit on that. That way you have a nice wide platform at the bottom and still a good tall structure to support. Once you get your hands to your hips, that's an option to keep them there. But I would even encourage keep the hands on the front thigh and heel and toe your left leg to the left so that your front leg mimics a little bit more of what you would want to do in a deep squat. So that's where your knee is not in line with the hip, it's slightly to the outside of the hip. Make sure your toes in the trajectory of your thigh are on the same plane, same angle. Engage your right glute, lift the lower belly, and let yourself settle in. Now, if you notice this is not quite at that level 7 or 6 of your intensity, if you're like at half of your tolerance, you can adjust this block and come down a level. So what that would look like is I would just flip the block to the next lowest setting, and then Michelle would sit on that. Just be discerning about what your body communicates. Try not to just go deeper for just the sake of going deeper. You know, deeper has to carry with it some value for you, right? It's not just tolerating pain. And the thing about the psoas muscles that we're putting some length on here, they take a little bit more time than some of the other muscles in the body because of how much tension they're constantly held under. So while sitting there, if you have some bandwidth for it, engage the right glute and try to turn your pelvis counterclockwise, where the right hip comes forward, the left hip comes just ever so slightly backwards. Have one more nice breath this way. And on the exhale, hands come down to the mat. Switch sides very carefully, please. And with your right foot forward and left knee down, before your hands come up, keep them on the mat. Separate the front leg, front foot from the back knee as much as you can. That brings your pelvis closer to the ground, and that's where you're going to use your block. So either tall setting or the shorter setting, whatever you did before. Okay, now if you go too deep into the hips this way, you have no choice but to have your front leg out to the side, right? So if I squat down this low, or if I lunge down this low, it's actually impossible to keep my thigh in line with the hip and not interfere with the joint structures of the hip. So this prevents the joint structures of your hips from colliding and rubbing unnecessarily against each other. It still gets you far into this left hip extension. So remember, what's our main hip extensor? The glute. So as you engage your left glute, simultaneously try to now clockwise rotate your pelvis. So that's left hip forward and right hip back. Continue using the hands to press your chest away from the front leg. Lift your lower belly like we did with the lunges before. The more distance you can have between your front leg and your upper body, the more hip extension that's going to imply. Good. We'll take these last 2 breaths. Notice if your jaw is strained and resisting, the psoas are a very, very neurologically rich and satiated muscle. And so all the neurology in that muscle connects to our fight or flight response because there are running muscles in a way. So it takes some time and it takes a little bit of a different, more mindful approach to get anywhere with them. Let's bring the hands down and then lay down on your back for the last minute or 2. If there's any other postures that your body requires before your rest, then feel free to get into those. So something that could be beneficial, I'm always a fan of twists. You could just do a spinal twist. You could otherwise do maybe like a bridge pose. You could do shoulder stand or plow. But one of the things that I really love about a twist, whether it's supine or not, is it exhibits an action in the spine that the spine doesn't regularly get much of in everyday life. Like think about at the course of your day, unless you're doing yoga or some kind of sport, how much spinal rotation do you ever call on to get something done? Doesn't happen all that often. I think the most classical reference is reaching into the back seat of a car to get something. When else do we need to twist? And so twists have been the kind of spinal movement that's lacked the most in our everyday life. So if you start to create a little bit more intelligence around that kind of movement, then you actually take care of your spine in a more complete way. One thing that we can absolutely be certain about with the body, like the old saying goes, if you don't use it, you do lose it. And there's a reason why our sedentary culture, which it is so stiff, is because we don't move. We sit in desks so much, we sit behind the wheel of a car so often, and all of that stillness doesn't actually create relaxation and flexibility. All that stillness, staticness, stasis, it just creates rigidity because your body does and becomes more proficient at the information that you feed it. And now let's get ready to actually shavasanize. So if you need something to put underneath your head, I would suggest like a little towel or a blanket. You can always curl up the top of the mat. Just make sure when you place your head on something that it helps you tuck your chin, but it's very slight. It's not like I'm asking you to bring your chin all the way into your throat. You just have a passive kind of head nod to where the back of the neck can really feel longer than it usually feels. And always, as a final touch, but no less important touch, is covering up your eyes. Covering up the whole territory of your eye socket will help prevent any light from sneaking in. And one of the best ways to actually get a full rest is to turn off our visual part of the brain. Because when the brain stops processing visual data, then it has less chances to be stressed. Because one thing that's become hardwired in evolution is vision as it detects danger in the environment. And as I always want to remind, the duration of Shavasana always depends on how much time you have today and after your practice. Even a minute can do a lot. But ideally, we want to be able to stay until we can carry with us this new, renewed physical sentiment into the rest of our day or night. So I hope you enjoyed your practice. It was always lovely to guide. Always grateful to Michelle for being the lovely demo, the patient demo. And I will see you soon. We will see you soon. Much love. Namaste.